Well, welcome to See Hear Love, and I'm so excited to announce that this is the first episode of our new series called Melinda and Her Colleagues. I hope you enjoyed our previous podcast series called SOS, Strengthening Summer of Strength, and I hope we strengthen you in so many areas that we inspire and encourage you to make good choices to follow the way to follow Jesus. And after this series, we're looking at See Hear Love presents, get ready, Melinda and her mentors. And the big question is, did you think Melinda was going to be where she is now when you met her then? And it's going to be an honest conversation with all of my mentors over the years. But this one, I'm very excited about because this is where you get to talk to your colleagues about them, about you, what they think about you, what you think about them, and some really neat, interesting things about them that maybe you never knew. So here's the thing, though. We're starting off this series, not just with a colleague, but hear this. My CEO of Crossroads and YESTV, Kevin Shepherd. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to lead it off.
I know, I'm like leading off with you. It's like, at first I thought, Kevin, I was like, should I wait to the end or the middle? Like, if it's a slow start. Okay, sorry to any of the colleagues who maybe I'm saying that it might be a slow start with you. But I mean, do we need to get you then? And I'm like, right at the top. Let's start. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you.
So there's a couple segments I've broken this conversation with you, Kevin. It's like segment 1, 2, 3, and 4. And segment 1 is basically an affirmation gush fest. And then I thought about it as just because I want you to gush about me, or is an opportunity. I think a lot of people don't sit with their colleague and just say, this is what I like about you. Right. This is what I respect about you. Right. And so maybe if we can do that here, it could change a lot of workplaces. Maybe they'll be inspired and they'll do the same thing. They'll turn to their colleague or on a Zoom. They'll say, I think I'm just going to take 5 minutes to say how much I appreciate you. I think you're great. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So let me start with you. I was thinking about you. And I have 4 points. But I think the first thing, and I know that you'll tell this in more of our conversation down the line, but to step in as CEO of Crossroads and YESTV, pretty much when the pandemic began. I'm going to let that sit with you listeners. Like, he stepped in as the pandemic began in our organization, and just to see your courage, a lot of courage, resilience, and perseverance through a very unprecedented, unexpected moment in history has been really beautiful to see and watch you. I think for me personally, how you implemented the monthly director meetings and the diversity and inclusion panel and discussion, there's such an intentionality of supporting and helping us as a staff in the areas in which we needed like an advocate or somebody to listen to the issues and then say, we're going to do something about it. And that was really, for me, Kevin, something that was very meaningful. Like we felt, many of us felt hurt. That it wasn't just like, yeah. We care about it. But you actually stepped in and said, well, actually going to do something, create that space. Love that your big focus and passion is in leadership development. And that's obvious in the things that you're doing with the directors, the books and the skills and resources that you give. And then, is it 24 years or more pastoral experience?
24 years, yeah.
Okay, so 24 years and that doesn't surprise me because I witnessed just your strong pastoral, shepherding, leadership development, team focus that you have, and that you deeply care about people in your family. Those are all good things.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say that to you because if this is the only chance, hopefully not, that I get to say this to you, then I hope that encourages you in the role that you have here.
Thank you. I hardly know what to say when somebody says all these nice things about you.
See, this is why.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that you're even just doing this and saying those things because sometimes in positions of leadership, people are quick to tell you the things they think you're not doing well, and maybe not as quick to tell you the things that they do appreciate are going well. So thank you, Melinda. That means something.
Yeah, I'm glad that you and I think that it's really funny, because as I was writing this, it was kind of like, do I say that? Is that too gushy? And I think maybe that's a challenge with us. I think we need to like start a culture of people to say that should be the first thing,
right?
Not that last thing or the second thing.
Right on.
Always start, with that.
So can I reciprocate?
Okay.
Okay. So what do I love about Melinda Aspilla?
See, this is where it's like, is this why this show?
I love that you have a strong shoe game.
Yes, thank you.
I do love the shoe game. I noticed the shoe. I do notice the shoe game.
Thank you.
I do love shoes myself, so I am a big fan of that. No, I would say you have incredible energy. You do. You bring that into every room that you go into, in every space. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have big energy all the time. It means you have the right energy that you infuse into the right moment. And that's a gift. That's powerful. It's not like, you just are the big personality all the time. Although you can be that, and you do have that in your wheelhouse.
Yes, I do.
But you have the ability to just adapt. And I believe that's a spirit-given ability to adapt to what's happening. And I would also say, you actually really see people and the beautiful story that they have, even if they don't see it themselves. And it's more than a job for you. It's actually who you are. That sounds a lot like Jesus to me, Melinda. I don't know if I can give you a better compliment than that.
No, I can't. I'm like,
that's Jesus. As he walked around, he saw people and loved people. Seehearlove.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was actually unintentional.
Perfect. That's a soundbite,
yeah.
Becca. That's a soundbite. Our producer's in here, Becca. Just so for people who are listening, I just went to Becca. Yeah. Mark that at 2 minutes and 31.
Yeah. So he did. That's what he did. He saw people. He loved people, and that's what you do. I think you see people and love people that you know, and you see people and love people that you don't even know yet. You just see opportunity and things in them. So that's what I really talk about.
I love it. Thank you. I received that. And I think when people see that, and that's actually your passion, and also the joy of what you do, you actually get paid to do what you're passionate about. Okay, that's just a sweet thing. Yeah. That'll be another conversation, because people always ask me, like, how do you get into a place where you actually get paid for what you actually feel called to or your passion? I'm like, it's a good question, right? And so it is. And I think, just to close up it's really an honor, and I hold this job with great responsibility of stewarding it well. And because I really believe God has sort of, in all the journey, I'm here, and it's so clear why. And so hearing that, Kevin, it's just like, it just sort of affirms, like, okay, in this season, this is what I'm to do. And to do it in Crossroads has been really great. It's the coolest thing ever. Like, I wish people would know more about Crossroads, because it's so great. Do you think so?
I do.
I hope so. Like, if you had said, I don't think Crossroads is great, that'd be a whole other podcast conversation.
I was just hesitating, because if I start talking about it a little bit, we're going to take
But no, talk about it. This is the thing. It actually will set the tone, because there are people who listen who don't know Crossroads. And when I say that, I've had years here, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the people, but I enjoy the space in which I can create content, creative content, and then put it on multiple platforms. And for me to articulate, it's just, but why don't you share what you love about it? And maybe give some context, Kevin, about what it is, Crossroads and YESTV, for those who don't know.
Sure. Well, we actually just celebrated our 60th anniversary. Just this past week for Crossroads, which is amazing to think about the legacy and the impact of Crossroads over those 60 years. I mean, if you think about what would Canada be like if Crossroads didn't exist for the last 60 years? Man, I can't. I'm afraid to think, because the influence of this ministry in so many ways is it's hard to quantify, really. But one of the things that I really do love about this ministry, among so many things, we have Crossroads Cares. We raised over $700,000 for Ukraine since the war happened.
Incredible.
So many powerful things to talk about. One of the things that I love to talk about with people that I didn't really fully appreciate or understand before I came here is the prayer center.
Yeah.
We actually, a couple months ago, answered our 13 millionth prayer call. 13
was that many? I knew it was a lot, but
million. Yeah. We received between 12 and 1,400 calls a day, every day, in the prayer center. On top of that, we receive all kinds of emails and text messages of people reaching out to us. And when we made a shift to digital, like a lot of people did in the midst of the pandemic, with YESTV, we cover 94% of the country with our linear broadcast. But we've made adjustments on our YouTube channel. We get now over 2 million views a month on our 100 Huntley Street YouTube channel. Well, because of, as you know, it's borderless.
Yeah.
So we've got people watching from around the world now calling into the prayer line. So, and I think we're just scratching the surface. We have some opportunity to really leverage the prayer center. We've seen that really actually become a life saver through the pandemic, helping people with mental health challenges who feel just at the end of the end of the end of everything that they can handle. And it's just been so special to listen to our prayer partners just care and love and see people and help them with the hope of Jesus. And that's just a little glimpse into the power and the opportunity I think that exists with Crossroads Media.
Would that be in that? I don't want to say, is that the favorite part of Crossroads for you, the prayer line, or what would you say is sort of like the highlight since you've been?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that word is either.
Yeah.
I think
I know. I was like, is it highlight? Is it the best? No, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the thing that sets us apart as a broadcaster, YESTV, is we're two-way. So other broadcasters are one direction. They want to bring a good product to people for either entertainment or news or whatever. For us, we've always wanted to be two directions. We want people to actually be able to reach out to us and us to walk with them and support them and love them and care for them and journey with them. That's the goal. So yeah, I guess that is the favorite part because that's the goal. The goal isn't just to produce something that people want to consume. It's actually to start a relationship and walk along with them as they walk along with God. And that's the most special thing to be able to do, to watch life transformation take place as we build those relationships with people. It's amazing.
Would you say going from sort of pastoral experience, being a pastor, to Crossroads has been an easy transition? Makes sense transition? Challenging? All of the above?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really describe it because, as you said, I onboarded in a pandemic.
But you better write a book about that because I don't know if anybody was like, hey, sign me up.
Yeah. Well, I actually did start a document about just after my first week here, and it's called My Journey at Crossroads.
Is that period?
And
like,
it's long.
Okay.
It's long. So, it was a big adjustment just because of the season, right? It's also a big adjustment for the role. It's a large organization, a television network. I didn't know how to run a television network before I came here. I do know people. God has helped me know people. And I think that's an encouragement for any leader as you're listening, whatever situation you're going into. Maybe you don't understand all the specifics about the situation, but people are people. People are people everywhere. And we're called to be leaders. And my philosophy is that everyone's a leader because everyone leads themselves, number one. But everybody influences someone. You could say that leadership is influence. So everybody influences someone. And so I think learning about servant-hearted leadership, how to have integrity and character in leadership, walking with leadership principles that I've learned and received from so many mentors and still do, and to be able to pass that on, that's really what drives me. That's what I'm about.
That's good. That's really good. I do know people. That's going to be a little tagline. I'm going to get a little shirt for you, Kevin. That's just like, I do know people. So when anybody comes up to you and says anything, it's like, I do know people. Because what can people say to that? Oh, okay, yeah, you do know people.
Hey,
just walk away.
That doesn't mean I know everything there is to know about people, or I have a case. There is a lot more I need to know about people.
I do know people. ...
Yeah.
Okay.
To be continued.
Okay. Fun, fast questions for you, and this is just like everybody, all my colleagues, we're all going to have the same question. So, aside from my show of See Her Love, what is your favorite TV or streaming show? Past or current, and why?
Okay, well, yes, of course I do love all the shows at Crossroads YESTV.
Disclaimer.
Okay, favorite child.
You can't.
So apart from all of those, I would say Survivor.
Really?
And I'll tell you why.
Okay, Survivor.
Well, it's because it's the only show right now that I still co-view with my daughter.
Oh,
My daughter
really?
is 17.
Okay.
And we co-view, my daughter, my wife, and my son has already moved out of the house, and so we co-view Survivor, and so I would say that's my favorite show. And Marianne this year, the winner, she's actually goes to seminary right here in Ontario.
I heard this. Yeah. I heard this. So really, is it because you can watch with your daughter, or because it's actually a good show?
Well, okay. I don't mind the show, obviously, otherwise I probably wouldn't go do it with her. Okay. But that's the real reason. I just love doing that with her.
That's actually, that might be, if any producers or directors of Survivor are listening right now to this podcast, this is good. This is actually a commercial thing, because I think in content, that's what we want. That's what we're trying to do here at Crossroads too, is to try to find, we do have sort of our demographic and our specific group, but also that's neat. That's like cross-generational, that you can watch one show and your daughter and you.
Yeah, well,
that's really neat.
Co-viewing with families doesn't happen very much anymore. Everybody's on their own tablet, their own device, watching their own thing. So it is a pretty rare thing to be able to co-view with your family, and I love it. That's why.
And again, anybody connected to Survivor, our CEO here at Crossroads and YESTV loves your show.
Yes.
Give him a call.
Yeah.
Okay. Aside from me, who is your favorite host or influencer, past or present? And you can.
So the answer is Jesus, right?
Oh, well.
Influencer.
Okay, so
it's okay.
Yeah, apart from Jesus,
and apart from Melinda,
and apart from me.
Okay. All right.
Just to make sure that's clear. Just to make sure we're really clear. Okay.
I would say probably someone like N.T. Wright. I love his writing, but I love the way he thinks about the culture and the biblical narrative, and I just think he's a powerful influencer. I really respect him.
When I was at Bible college, we read N.T. Wright. Was it the Paul? I can't believe I can't remember this, because we read a bunch of books. It changed the way I read scripture, how I thought about things. His language, the way that I would have to pause out and go,
yeah, wait a minute, I gotta think about that.
Because usually I can read really quickly. I really train myself to read really quickly, distill the knowledge really fast, write it down.
Right.
But N.T. Wright kind of forced me to be like, okay, whoa, first of all, what did he just say? And then go back to it and really think about it. So and I think it drove me crazy because I was so slow in reading it.
Yeah.
And I'm not used to that. And I'd read, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta read that again. And then highlight that. So yeah, I really like N.T. Wright. Yeah. Okay. Kevin, aside from our See Hear Love book, Always Know, that you can actually buy on seehearlove.com or on Amazon. I'm doing it all day long, doing some pitches here. What is your favorite book and why? Okay, and aside from the Bible. Because I thought you might do that.
Preemptive. Good job. Well done.
Okay.
I actually did buy a number of See Hear Love books and gave them out to friends and family for Christmas.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Ta-da.
Thank you. I know you did. You did. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm going to go to a book that probably your listeners have not read.
Okay.
Something that has really inspired me and challenged me over the last year, and it's called The Manifesto for a Moral Revolution by someone named Jacqueline Novogratz. And it's not necessarily a Christian book, but the principles that she articulates in there about righteousness and justice, the inspirational way that she is and actually functionally bringing massive transformation around the globe. I dare you to read this book and not be inspired.
Say it again. The Manifesto
for a Moral Revolution by Jacqueline Novogratz. Powerful.
Yeah, we might have to just put that up. Becca, let's make sure we put that up on our website. Well, maybe I should. I'll read it first.
Yeah, read it. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, I trust your judgment.
I mean, the clarification is obviously I don't agree with everything in the book. I hardly agree with everything that I write. You look back on it 10 years later and you go, oh, did I actually say it? Yeah. But, there's just so much in there that I think we can learn from about what we're trying to do in the world right now.
Okay. And then finally, I don't know why I do this because, time to turn the tables, Kevin. You can ask me anything you want. Pretty much anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Why did I even do that? Here's the funny part. Nobody's writing my scripts. I have a choice to not have that in there, but I fit it in there.
Good.
Okay. Go for it.
So I asked this question of a lot of leaders over my life, and I've kept notes, by the way, so I'm going to be really listening to your answers.
Great. Got to be really smart now.
So the question I asked is, what's the number one lesson you've learned in leadership / what leadership principle do you lean on the most in your life?
It's good. Okay. It'd be two, but this one is one that it's not natural. I have to think and choose intentionally. I am a communicator and talker. I talk my way out of things. I can fill space when space should be quiet. I talk a lot. I can talk fast. But the biggest thing I've learned is that leading well means listening well. And man, is that something for somebody who's an extrovert, communicator, wants to get my point across, maybe has some control issues and control. If I can get the final word in, then I got them convinced. And my heart as a fundraiser is the woo and the talk. So I'm a talker. But you can't lead well if you're talking all the time and not listening to what people are saying. And then pausing to then listen better and deeply, because sometimes they may say something, but actually there's something else that needs to be said. And
so how have you done that? How have you learned to listen well as somebody who, that's a counterintuitive thing for you?
It is completely counterintuitive. I would speak before I would listen. So I was in years and different mentors. I've had to learn to actually think, to stop myself. Sometimes I have to breathe. I have to physically breathe to stop, or I have to in my mind actually say, like, stop and listen. So
it's about like recognizing what's happening.
100%. Yeah. Because in the moment, and this is the other thing, is through certain traumas and moments in my life, I've been forced to pause, or I've been unable to go and do. Like if when I went through kind of really dark depression, or when I was hospitalized, there's actually forced moments.
Right.
And those were the moments where I realized partly that I wasn't listening to myself. Talk, escape, do anything else than to listen to and take positive inventory of who I am. And then, on that side, it's like, oh, that's kind of dark, or I don't like myself. We need to do something. And I've also seen leaders that are great leaders listen. And they actually physically lean in to listen. And then listening to them as they distilled what they were hearing in some of the most powerful things from something very simply said. And I was like, you can get that from listening, which for someone who's a storyteller, so much now of being a great storyteller is actually listening to the story and giving that space, and then maybe then asking the right question and not talking. So,
as you do that, as you listen more and listen better, it actually aligns more with your core heart of who you are as a leader for loving people. Because listening is so close to loving, most people can't tell the difference. And when you really listen to someone and you really understand them, you actually are showing love to them. And that's what I know you want to do for people. So it actually aligns better with who you really are.
Realize that. But, and I say this just to end this because, a lot of people say listening, but it's actually something I have to really work hard on. Yeah. This is not like one of those things where you sort of condition that's for some people, like my husband, he's a great listener. Sometimes I wish he would talk more. Honey, I love you. This is not a slam against you. But what I mean is just like, but he's actually listening for all of it. Because when you do listen, you hear a lot more and you can get a lot more. And I was like, it's amazing that happens when you listen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I understand that myself. I think as leaders, we often are talkers. Leaders are often talkers. Because we've got to influence, and we've got to encourage people, inspire people, we've got to make things happen. So you got to be that way. So it's often a counterintuitive principle for all leaders. But one of the ways I've had to learn in that respect is I choose to understand before I want to be understood. That's a challenge.
Mhm.
But if I'm truly actually wanting to understand what Melinda's saying and who Melinda is, and I'm asking questions about that, you all of a sudden earn the right in their mind
Mhm.
to be able to speak into whatever the situation is. Sometimes that happens over time. It doesn't happen necessarily as fast as we all want it to do. And that's one of my issues because I'm always wanting to move down the road.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's beautiful, Melinda. That's great. Thanks for
Thanks for asking that. That was really good. I might want to do more of these because it's funny as somebody who has a platform to listen to stories and give people that space. It's funny when someone actually asks me because I'm like, what? I was asking you that.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Maybe one day it's going to be like ask me some questions because it's been good. Even when you ask me, I'm like, oh, I've learned a lot of things as a leader. It's good. I need to do that more. I need to ask myself more questions. All right, thank you for that. So we've said earlier, Kevin, about stepping into this role as CEO of Crossroads and YESTV as we're entering into the pandemic. So here are more of the more serious questions. Okay. What have you learned as a leader, leading teams, leading yourself, as you look back on the last 2 years? Not to say, there still are, people say we're kind of in pandemic, it's changed. But in the last 2 years, when we entered into it, what would you say you have learned?
Oh, wow. So very much. So very much. Some stuff I didn't want to learn, frankly. So very much.
I bet.
I would say not only what I've learned, but what I've relearned. There's things I've relearned in this season. And if I could boil down one of them, I would say you can't replace presence.
Mm.
So I'm very thankful that in the midst of the pandemic, most organizations were able to, that good old word pivot and shift to digital and, become remote work and all those things that most of us had to do. And I'm thankful that imagine if this happened 20 years ago, we didn't have the capability of technology.
I don't know what we do.
I can't imagine. It would be collapse all over the place. So
Right.
very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for texting and FaceTime and Zoom and all that stuff, although I zoomed out at the beginning of the pandemic after a short period of time. But you can't replace this. You can't replace you and me being in the same room together. You just can't replace presence. And so I say relearn because that phrase, you can't replace presence, I believe that God gave me when we went through a difficult season as a family. So when my son was 14, he's 22 now, when he was 14, he had to have open heart surgery. It was a very, as you can imagine, very difficult time for our family. And we went to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And as we walked through that season, I could tell you a lot about that whole season. I was praying one day and I was asking God for a scripture verse to encourage me to, what do I need to know as we walk through this? And a verse came to my mind that seems really obscure. Like, what in the world is that verse? And why now? So it's Proverbs 16. It says, when the king smiles, there is life. His favor refreshes like a spring rain. And it popped in my mind. I'm like, what in the world does that have to do with the fact that my son is having heart surgery? And there was lots of risks to it. It was an extensive surgery. What does that have to do with anything? So after just kind of thinking about it, talking about it with my wife, praying, I realized that in the season we were in, we needed people around us to support us and help us through. I see myself as a pretty independent, strong person who doesn't necessarily need a lot of help all the time. I actually have had to learn to need people as a counterintuitive principle. But we needed friends and family and people to support us as we walked through this challenge. And we needed them present. We just didn't need to know. People, we always do this all the time in the church. Saying, oh, pray for you about that. Be thinking about you. And I think we do pray for people and think about them, but it's not the same as presence. And so I realized that verse a king back then, he couldn't smile on someone unless they were in his presence. He couldn't truly smile on them unless they were there. And when they were there, then it refreshes like a spring rain.
Wow.
And so I made that commitment and understanding at that time. I wanted to do everything I possibly could to be present with people. That means showing up.
Mhm.
Showing up at times when people don't expect it, and showing up when people do expect it. But it also means when I'm with someone, I'm present. And that's hard for me because I'm, type A driven, focused kind of person. And so I've really disciplined myself since then that when I'm with someone, the rest of the world goes away. All these pressures and things that I'm pushing on, no, you are in front of me. I am with you. You are what's important right now. And so I would say in the pandemic, in all of the things, there's so many things I've learned. You can't replace presence. So we're forced isolation. There's a reason. Isolation is punishment for a reason. Forced isolation, especially for some people who are, extroverts. I'm actually introverted. I find So
Horrible.
I find re-energization from actually being alone for a little bit. My extroversion is learned behavior. But everybody.
Yeah.
You can't replace it.
Right. So interesting because my word for this year, after interviewing Joan, who had a book about 50 things you can learn from sort of the Benedictine experience. And I'm flipping through the book. I only have a bit of time with her, Kevin, and the word leaps off the page and stadio. Being present in the moment.
Mm.
And so she had, the year before or so, she was interviewed on Oprah's, Super Sunday, and she's like 85 and she's spicy and amazing. I loved her energy. And I'm like, we're talking through different things. And I said, okay, here's the one that really gets me, the stadio. And she's through Zoom. And she looks at me, she goes, let me just share how that works. Because I'm like being present in the moment. She goes, so I know that I knew that I was going to interview you, or you were going to interview me. So like 45 minutes before the interview, I decided to think about you. So I sat in the room, I was thinking about you. I Googled you and found out that you were married. So I thought about your husband and your bonus kids. And I prayed for you. And then I imagined our conversation together and how I would be. Then I prayed for you. Then I sat again and thought of you. So when you showed up in Zoom, and when we got together, I was fully present because I prepared myself for 45 minutes to be with you. And this was just an extension of the choice I'd made to already choose you.
So good.
Kevin, I have done 600, 700 interviews in my 25-year career of this kind of thing. I have never heard anybody who I was interviewing, because I was now, of course, then I was going totally convicted because I was scrambling around, screaming, where's the print? And I don't know what I'm reading. I was like a mess. And I come in and she was just like, so good. And so it kind of disarmed me. And she said, so that's what study means. It's actually being fully present, preparing presence. I'm like, you prepare to be present.
So good.
She goes, oh yeah, that's part of being present. If you prepare to be present, then you're present. And then you're not thinking of other things. And then when you end, you honor and you go. And it was the most honoring moment and connection I've ever had with anybody. I've interviewed a lot of great people, as you would say, people like famous people, but this was anything. So I love what you say, because now I've said to many people, stadio. So people are like, that's my word, stadio. So anyway, I appreciate that. So that's kind of the same thing of that. So excellent. You can't replace presence. Okay. On that, I've had a lot of friends. I've read a lot of blogs of after and through and in the midst of the pandemic, we had leaders and ministry leaders and pastors go, I'm tapping out. I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. I can't do this. It was brutal trying to bring my community, my congregation along, my family along, and I just want to tap out, quit, and end. What would you say? And I say this because and hear me, listeners, when I say this. I wish I'd had this conversation in the midst of it, because sometimes I don't always like when you're out of it, because sometimes you're just and you're out of it now. But I think that it's a appropriate because you've been through it to speak to this person.
Yeah. And I would say, if you're through it, there'll be another something like it coming at some point where you're going to feel that way. And so what would I say to that person? Or you mean, what do I say to myself when I feel that way? Because
rephrase the question. strike the one I just said, and let's rephrase what Kevin is asking.
Well, I say that because I think it's important. I think it's important distinction because I'm not just speaking to someone else who feels like quitting sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm identifying that I feel like quitting sometimes. And I think that's important because, and I genuinely have felt like quitting in the midst of the pandemic because it has been excruciating. And I think that's important because sometimes we look at leaders who are leading organizations, we think, man, they're bulletproof, they got things together, they're courageous, whatever. And some of those things may be true, but it can also be true that some days you feel like quitting. And so what do I say to myself and what should anyone say to themselves? I think there's a couple of things. One is, I think there is hope. We always have to remember there is hope. And hope, I don't just necessarily mean that aspirationally. I mean that confidently. The hope for a believer is different. We have an assurance that is our hope because our hope is in Jesus. And so it's not just aspirational, I hope I'm going to make it through this. There's a confident hope. So there is hope. And I actually, I'm going to say a line that you said to me that you might not remember you said to me a number of years ago. It was actually when you were at the church that I was pastoring at the time, and we had a conversation, and you were talking about someone that you were walking through a challenging time with. And you had said to me this line, I don't know if this is a line you say all the time, or you just said that to me that day and it stuck with me, but I do remember that you said to them, today is not forever. I don't know if that's a line that you
No, it is. Today is not your forever.
Today is not your forever.
That is my line.
So I think that's a really, really appropriate thing to say to people, because when you're in the midst of the hardship, it can feel like it's forever. It can feel like that's the way it's going to be and that it's always going to be like that. And it's not. It's just not. I mean, we've been through other hard things before, and we've got through them, and we've grown, and it's been hard and challenging, but we've got through them, we've learned through them, we've grown through them. And so I think those two things, I think there is hope. There always is hope because there's Jesus. And today is not your forever. I think we can get through this.
That's good. I think that for a lot of people who are in that place, I think even them to sit in that and think about that and not get discouraged. Because sometimes, I mean, I'll admit it was really hard. It was hard, but then on the other side for us, it was like an opportunity to then create content to inspire people with hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like this strange, like, oh, this is so hard.
Yeah, and you say, and not get discouraged. I mean, I think we will get discouraged. We just will, and it's okay.
Oh, we will.
And it's not that you don't have faith. I went through that a little bit. I was like, oh man, I need to be doing better than I'm doing right now emotionally. I need to be stronger. I'm supposed to be the leader and the pastor and whatever. And so you're self-critical. That's one of the things I have to work on. I can be pretty self-critical. But there's speak truth in life and encouragement to you.
And some kindness.
Yeah.
Trying to be more kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
It's good. I like that. Okay, Kevin, what person or story in the Bible do you identify most with when it comes to your leadership style and not Jesus? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
It's always going to be disclaimer,
yes,
not Jesus or the Bible.
Go. So my life verse is actually Philippians 1:25. So a lot of people know Philippians 1:21. For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. That's Paul writing that. But I find it interesting that Paul, a few verses later, says, yeah, but I know I'm going to stay alive. He says, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain, but I actually know I'm going to stay alive to continue to help you grow and experience the joy of your faith.
Okay.
So that's what I feel like the Lord has called me to do, is to help people grow and experience the joy of their faith.
Mm.
And so the person that I relate mostly to is not Paul, the one who said that necessarily, but the one he mentored, which would be Timothy. So I really relate to Timothy. Timothy's a young pastor. I consider myself young. Yes, I still do.
Absolutely. I was going to mention that. When he came in, I was like, man, you look like so young.
What? Your son is 20.
And then I was like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, no. I was going to say that, but you were talking. So
And, Paul saying to Timothy, so many things, mentoring and leading and encouraging. And I feel like I'm a young leader because the more I know, the more I know I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's so much more that I want to learn and know about how to do that better, grow and experience the joy of it. But I hear Paul say to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2, verse 2, he says, take the truths that I pass to you and pass them on to other trustworthy people who will pass them on to other people. So I call that think for. Because you've got Paul, who passed it on to Timothy.
Right.
And he's telling Timothy, pass it on to someone else who will pass it on to someone else. And I think so many times as leaders, we just think about, well, we got to lead another person. We actually need to learn to lead through people and train them how to lead other people who lead through people. So there's an old Maimonides quote where Maimonides says, if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Mm-hmm. If you teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So I kind of add to that.
Okay.
So if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime. But if you teach a person how to teach a person to fish, you can feed a nation.
Teach a person.
Because you continue to just multiply the people who know how to multiply people. And so if you use that in a leadership context, if you give a person an opportunity to lead, they can lead in a moment. If you teach them how to lead, they can lead in many moments. But if you teach someone how to teach someone to lead, you can shift the culture and change the nation.
That's great.
So that's, I would say, what I identify the most with, that I'm constantly trying to learn and grow, not just about how do I build a leader, but how do I build a leader who knows how to build leaders. I think when we uncover that, when we do that, it's really amazing to see. That's when the immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, I think, actually takes place as God works through us.
That's a good visual, like what you just did there, because I can see it. Now, my question then is, can you teach anyone to multiply, or are there people that you should specifically identify for that?
Yeah, I think so. I talked about having I, see, and you conversations. That's not original to me. That's someone named John Ferguson, Dave and John Burson, who launched a massive leadership development network. Mm-hmm. And they say the 4 most important letters in the alphabet: I, C, N, U. So you have I, C, and U conversations. Just a way to remember. Yeah. I, C, and U conversations with people. And I think it's important to understand that not all leaders are the same. Right. People are different. But you can have I, see, and you conversations when you actually do take the time to see, hear, and love them. Right. About what you see in them and the possibilities that God wants to do through them. I think we don't speak to people's potential enough, so that they don't even see it. So who knows what they can do? Right. Think about this. I mean, I had this thought the other day. David Mays was 26 years old when he had 26 years old. He had the idea of Crossroads.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think about that a lot too, because somebody reminded me, because I always think of David as an older man.
Right. So I said to some other leaders the other day, who do we know that's 26 that has the next idea for Crossroads? Like a Crossroads. The next thing that could really explode and transform thousands, maybe millions of people's lives. And they're 26. Are we giving them space? Are we giving them room? Are we speaking into their life? Are we equipping them? Are we supporting them? Are we praying for them? Are we giving them the stage? Are we giving them the microphone? Are we giving them the opportunity? Are they sitting at decision-making tables? What are we doing to make room and make space for people that God is going to unlock something powerful that we couldn't even imagine? That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's different for different people. And are there some people that it's going to look to? Yeah, but I think we've got to speak. It's present in everyone because God is present in everyone. To what degree, in what way? I don't know. That's what we get to watch the adventure happen.
That's good. I like that 4. Think for, you said.
Think for, yeah.
That's good. I'm circling that.
Always trying to think for. So I'm thinking about people pouring into my life, like Paul and Timothy, and how am I pouring into someone, but equipping them, not only with just information for them, but how I'm inspiring them to equip someone else with what I'm giving them.
That's really good. Are you doing a book on that? Think for?
I am. It's not
You are?
exactly on thing 4,
Oh.
but it's in a book that I'm on.
To the listener, I didn't know that. That's just insane. That was just came out of me. Maybe I just exposed a big secret that I wasn't supposed to know. No, it's amazing. I will buy that. Though See Hear Love's book, Always Know, will still be my favorite book. All right.
Next to the Bible.
Yeah, next to the Bible and
yeah,
Jesus.
right.
Okay. This is a question I'm very fascinated because we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, and I get this question a lot, and I have a lot of leaders who are in this space. So it's a very light, easy question. A one-word answer: no. How do you lead in and through divisiveness, polarizing viewpoints and beliefs, expectations from people that they feel that you need to act and believe a certain way? And I say this because there's always been divisiveness and polarity and everything in the world for generations. But because of this year where everything was sort of kind of stand still and we had space and moment to look and see, or maybe it was space to finally like things to kind of come to the surface that were bubbling, whatever. But for a leader who's like, how do I do this well when my organization, we're split, my congregation is divided, my family is divided on polarizing issues, people, politics, all of that. What would be your encouragement? How have you led in and through this?
Yeah. So thank you for the softball question.
Yeah. Like I said, easy,
Very
light.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so a few things, so many things going on in my mind as you bring that up. But I would say, let's just identify something that makes this particularly challenging in our culture. It's true that you said this has existed for ever.
Yeah.
It seems like, though, over the last few years, what was latent has become exacerbated because of the issues. So I think, what seems to intensify it in these days is our culture tends to view itself as autonomous. So they say everyone can make their own decisions for who they are, that they're, you have your own truth and all those sorts of things. We say we're autonomous. You can decide what's true for you, and I can decide what's true for me, and you can do what you think is right, and I'll do what I think is right, because we're autonomous. We're individualistic. There's a rugged individualism in our culture. Until you do something or say something that offends someone's sentimentality, and then they shift to being heteronymous, which means I got to tell you what to do. Yeah. So which is it, autonomous or heteronymous, right? Are we actually autonomous? So we're actually not. We actually say we are, but we're not really. And I think that comes from a fundamentally misunderstood definition of freedom. Because people think freedom means the absence of boundaries. So people think freedom of speech means that you can say whatever you want. Well, you actually can't say whatever you want, right? You utter a death threat to the prime minister, and that's not going to go so well for you, right? So you can't say whatever you want. So what is true freedom? True freedom is discovering the correct boundaries. It's like an illustration I heard Timothy Keller give one time. Was he was saying, imagine you're a fish. You're a fish in the restriction of the ocean. And you swim by the beach all the time, and you look at the beach, and you go, oh man, I would love to be out on the beach. They just look like they're having so much fun, playing volleyball and sunning on the beach. I love that. So you take the fish, you remove it from the restriction of the ocean, and you put it on the beach. Did you free it? No, you actually killed it because you took it out of the right restriction for it. So the fish has all kinds of freedom within the right boundaries. The same thing's true for us. So we believe that the Bible helps us understand what those right boundaries are. Now, there's lots of interpretation of the Bible, and it's a challenge to so many nuances there. That's challenging. I think that's more specific to what you're asking. And so I'll say this, the only way I know to move a diverse group of people in a common direction is common ground. We have to find common ground. We search for common ground. We mine for common ground. And I'll tell you this, there is common ground with everyone. Somewhere, somehow, some way, you have something in common with everyone. It may not seem like it on the surface, but if you look for it and you're patient and you see, hear, love, I actually will say, when you see someone, you really see them. There's a sociologist named David Augsburger who coined a phrase. So you've heard of sympathy, you feel for someone, empathy. He coined a phrase called interpathy.
Interpathy.
Interpathy. So sympathy, you really feel for someone. Empathy, you kind of feel the feelings that they feel. Interpathy, he said, is when you actually see the world through someone's eyes. You get to understand their position so well, you see through their eyes. Well, that's going to help you build common ground. If you actually understand someone so much where they're coming from, you actually start to see the way they see. Doesn't mean you always agree. You actually understand why they see what they see and the way they see it. I think listening, we've already talked about. Listening is so close to loving, most people can't tell the difference. So seek to understand to be understood. And then loving. I think, that sacrificial, lay your life down, want to serve other people. The Bible says love covers a multitude of sins.
Yes.
And so what sins does love cover? Some people have said love covers a multitude of sins means that if I love someone, it will cover my own sins, my bad sins. So love indeed it's almost like God is a cosmic scoreboard. And, if I love enough, it's going to cleanse some of the sin stuff. That's not the principle, because First John says we know what love is because Jesus laid his life down for us. So love is actually sacrifice. It's not something you do to get. It's something you do to sacrifice for the other. It's other-centered. So I think loving in that lens means that love is not blind. Love actually sees more. Love is not blind. Love actually really sees. But because it sees more, it chooses to see less.
Wow.
I think that's what Jesus does for us all the time. He's not blind to my faults, my failures, my sins. He sees me. He really sees me. He sees me better than I see me. But because of that, he chooses to apply his grace. And he speaks into my life and my future and my purpose. And I think that's what I've been trying to do, is just really listen where people are coming from, understand and try to understand the pressures and the stresses everyone's feeling, and then lovingly find our common ground and walk that road together. It is such a long process. See,
it is.
And here's one of the
things. Actually, as you're saying this, I'm like,
oh yeah.
I mean, I'm saying in a good way, but I get that it's not overnight.
And that's the problem. We're in an instant society where everybody wants this overnight. I want it overnight.
Me too.
Right? I want solutions to all these issues right now. And I feel the knot in my stomach when I don't have it figured out. And we're journey-based. God's created us journey-based. We're not arrival-based.
It's a good reminder. I like that, journey-based.
If we were arrival-based, God would have airlifted the Israelites out of Egypt and dumped them in the promised land.
Because the whole 40 years, and you're just like, you didn't go too far. Like, actually, when you see the distance of where they went, you're like...
It should have been 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I was saying, you know what? We did this in our small group. Of course, I've got like fact checkers in my group. And so we were talking about that verse. And one was like, can I just tell you something? I just Google mapped.
Yeah.
And he was like, and then he brings it up. And actually, it was quite shocking because we're like, that's not far.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's not the point of. But you're right. We are rival based. I want to get there fast.
And I'll say this as you bring up that, or as I bring up that, as we bring up that.
Yeah.
One little quick thing on that. One of the things that really the Lord brought to my attention at the beginning of the pandemic is I was like, God, I want to know the way. I want to know how to figure this out. I want to solve all this and know what to do and what's the way forward. And I felt like God said to me, what do I mean by that? I think, I had this impression, this thought, and I think it was God. Just as I brought the Israelites out of Egypt, I will lead you through this pandemic. So I thought, I better get back to the Bible and read it again. What actually happened there? So I kind of read it all through. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, Kevin Shepard paraphrase, but it basically said, when they were out of Egypt, God did not lead them along the main road to the promised land, even though it was the shortest route.
I read that. That's what came out of it in that, which we had to pause on.
Instead, because he knew they couldn't handle, the Philistines were on that road, he knew they couldn't handle battle. Instead, he led them in a roundabout way. We hate the roundabout way.
Yeah, I don't like roundabouts.
Now, led them in a roundabout way. And so they were supposed to go east. He led them south towards Migdol. And there's all kinds of stuff I could talk about there. But I think that That's the thing. So the phrase that I ended up coming to was, we want God to give us a roadmap to the future, and he gives us something so much better, a relationship with the one who is the way.
Mm.
We have a relationship with the one who is the way, and it's hard, but we can lean on him and he'll help us lead people in the right way as well.
Good. Really good. We've said a lot about leadership. We've talked about that. And I mean, I've written some things that you just pulled up. So I could probably answer this question to you from what you've said, but I want you to answer it. For the young leader, Kevin, or someone who is in the early stages of leadership, they're younger. I mean, we're young, so they're like really young in the early stages of leadership. What is one crucial habit that you would say that they should develop to be a really good leader?
Oh man, there's so many, but maybe I'll be a bit vulnerable and that will help people. And I will say, encourage yourself in the Lord. And I'll tell you where that comes from and why I think that's really important. So, and maybe I'll give a kind of a practical way to live that out. So there's a kind of a long version of this, which I know we probably don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll give you the short version. But I'll give you a little bit of context. So story, David in 1 Samuel 30, he's been in this really difficult time, chased out of his homeland. He's got 600 of his men, I think, and has lost most things. He's actually invited to fight with the Philistines, his enemies. Invited to fight with the Philistines because he's living in Philistines territory, because he's running and he's hiding and he's trying to survive. He's like, okay, I don't know what else to do. He goes to fight with them because he's living in their territory. He doesn't have any other options. When he gets there, the rest of the Philistine rulers, I think it was King Achish that invited him to come and fight with them. The rest of the Philistine leaders are like, no, we don't want him to fight. He's going to stab us in the back. So no. So they had a 3-day journey to go to the front lines for the battle, and got rejected. They make the 3-day journey back to where they were living, a place called Ziklag. When they get there, they see that the Amalekites had come in and taken everything, burned everything that they had worked on for the last 16 months, taken everything, taken their women and their children, everything gone, everything's gone. So now all of David's men are turning against him. So not only is rejected from it, I have to fight with my enemy, rejected from my enemy, everything's been taken from me. Now my men are turning. And my
people are turning on me.
They're all turning on me. And here's what David does in that moment. He prays. And the Bible says he encouraged himself in the Lord. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, I wouldn't do that then. I wouldn't. And he prayed and he asked 2 questions. Should I go after them? Will I catch them? And I thought that first question, I thought, he lost his courage. Should I go after him? David, you're a warrior and they took your family.
Of course you would.
Some things you don't have to pray about.
You do.
You go get them.
Yeah, right.
Then I realized he didn't lose his courage. He prayed the most courageous prayer in the Bible. Not my will, but yours be done. The prayer that Jesus prayed before he went to the cross. Of course, David wanted to go after him. He's a warrior. He stopped in that moment. He wanted the Lord's will. And he encouraged himself in the Lord. And he prayed. He got the ephod and he prayed. And then the rest of the story is, and I realized I probably should just, the rest of the story, should say about my son's heart surgery. He actually recovered through the heart surgery and has done extremely well. And he's getting married in October, and we're very excited about that.
Way to go. Congratulations.
Sorry, I just realized that was a...
As you let it hang, and everyone was like, what happened? Okay. That was good, though.
But the rest of the story is, God says, go after them, and you'll catch them. And the rest of the story is he goes and he gets everybody back. Great. But I started thinking, okay, in the midst of those moments that I have, I don't know how to encourage myself in the Lord. I don't know what that looks like. What do I practically do? What do I actually do to encourage myself? Well, so here's what I do. Here's what I started to do. Every night before I would put the kids to bed, I started with them. I practiced on the kids. I would ask them, they were younger then, I would say, what did you do today to make Jesus smile? And they would review their day and tell me all the things that they did that they think would make Jesus smile. And I realized after doing that with them for a while, I needed to do that myself. So when I'm going to bed, I'm laying in bed, that's what I do. I go, okay, here's the things I did to make Jesus smile. Now, here's what I noticed happened to me when I started to do that. I started to have the yeah buts. So I'd say, oh, I think I was encouraging to Melinda and the listeners as we talked to the podcast. But I should have said this, and yeah, I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have done this. And the self-critical voice comes up. And so what I decided was I was going to try to have 5 minutes of just straight encouraging myself in the Lord without the critical thought. And if I have the critical thought come in, I have to start over. The time clock has to start over.
Oh, you have rules for yourself on this?
Rules for myself. Because otherwise I know I'll cave.
Okay.
So that's what I do. And I still do it. I've been doing this for years and years and years. And part of that is the reason I'm saying I'll be vulnerable is I'm very self-critical. I've been very hard on myself through my life. And that's been, it does allow me to excel in things because I work so incredibly hard because I don't want to fail and all that stuff. But it is a mental problem. It's a challenge that I'm creating for myself that I don't believe that God wants me to. I learned that if other people talk to me the way that I talk to me, I wouldn't be their friend. So I encourage myself in the Lord, and I've just slowly been able to extend. And in doing that, I feel the Lord's pleasure. I actually hear the Spirit's voice saying, well done. Well done. I'm emotionally saying that to you. I guess that's what I want. That's all I want. I just want Jesus to say, well done. And I don't want to have to wait to heaven to hear him say that. And I think there's so many listeners, there's so many young leaders in the midst of this critical age, this world where everything's cancel culture, and they're so afraid and they feel like all the flaws are pointed out and encouragement doesn't happen. I so appreciate that you started with encouragement today. I think it's so needed and so underrated. In the midst of all that, encourage yourself, Lord. Hear the pleasure of God. Hear Jesus say to you, well done. Hear him say, I love you, and the things that he affirms about you because he created you. He knows you. He sees you. And it's so important to combat the enemy. And I don't give a lot of airtime to the enemy, but he's an accuser. He's a liar. And we listen to those lies. And that keeps young leaders from what God has called them to do, to bring transformation to this world. We need to listen to the encouragement of the Spirit of God and then walk in that every day in the midst of the challenges that we have.
It's beautiful. I want to finish off kind of with a blessing to you. It's part of the thing. So we do encouragement, and then every episode I do a blessing, and then I might have you pray for our listeners and viewers after. But this is from John O'Donoghue. He is he was an Irish poet, author, and priest. So I love it because the language is very different from what we usually use. But when I found this, I'm like, I think this would be for Kevin. So I'm going to bless you with it as a prayer. So Kevin, may the gift of leadership awaken in you as a vocation, keep you mindful of the providence that calls you to serve. As high over the mountains the eagle spreads its wings, may your perspective be larger than the view from the foothills. When the way is flat and dull in times of gray endurance, may your imagination continue to evoke horizon. When thirst burns in times of drought, may you be blessed to find the wells. May you have the wisdom to read time clearly and know when the seeds of change will flourish. In your heart, Kevin, may there be a sanctuary for the stillness where clarity is born. May your work be infused with passion and creativity and have the wisdom to balance compassion and challenge. And may your soul find the graciousness to rise above the fester of small mediocrities. And may your power never become a shell or in your heart would silently atrophy. And may you welcome your own vulnerability as the ground where healing and truth join. And may integrity of soul be your first ideal, the source that will guide and bless your work.
Wow.
Amen.
Wow. I would like to copy that, please. That is amazing. Thank you. I receive that and want to walk in that. Thank you.
what came out at me was, I love this image of the eagle spreads its wings so that your view is larger than the view from the foothills. Like it was like, because sometimes we think that's it and it's actually larger. So I bless you with that, and a prayer for you as you lead. This has been a joy. I feel like we could have gone like 10 hours. There's so many more questions, but I really thank you for your time, your vulnerability, and the fun. And yeah, it was really meaningful for me. It really was rich, and it's nice to know. And I mean, for many people, are like, could I interview my CEO? Try, see, but it's nice to personalize. A lot of times we go about work, and we're with our workmates more, or spend more time than our actual own family. And then there are times where it's like you work with them, you see them, but you actually don't know them at all. Like they're actually people, people with thoughts and things. So I wanted to do this series, and because I thought, man, we've got some great people in our organization, and it's time to hear their story, or a little deeper than just maybe like a host on a screen. Actually, who are they? And so I'm so glad that we could kick this series off with you, and it did me proud. Because if not, I'd be like, Becca, I think he's at the end.
Don't tell him that we're not going to start with it.
Actually, we're going to edit it down to 5 minutes sound bites. Like the 4s, it's just sound bites. I wrote them down. Becca, just cut it, paste it, and we'll go. But anyway, can we end to, Kevin, if you could just say a quick prayer for a listener viewer as they lead, as they lead today, young, older, seasoned, mature, that would be great.
Dear Heavenly Father, we bow in your presence, and we give you thanks. In the midst of all the challenges of the day, the burdens that people are carrying, concerns, fears, worries, uncertainty, we give you thanks. We thank you because of your grace, your goodness, your love, your mercies that are new every morning, your strength that you deposit into us. We thank you for that, Lord. And we trust you. We trust you to give us everything we need to be the leaders you called us to be in this season. We pray for divine words of wisdom, for rest, for joy, for growth. Lord, that you would just continue to draw us close to yourself. We're humbled by your mercy and your love. We're humbled you've called us. And we're honored to worship you with our leadership. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Kevin Shepard, CEO of Crossroads and YESTV. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for spending this time with us. And know as you lead, of course, my tagline for any show, know as you lead that you are seen, you are heard, you're deeply, deeply loved by God. And I hope you'll join us all this special series of See Hear Love Presents Melinda and her colleagues. We've got lots of fun, lots more inspiration for you. And so thanks for being with us, and I hope you'll join us for our next episode. Bye-bye. Bye.